Everett to Eastlake. This is KIRO Radio, 97.3 FM.
News and talk, powered by the Pacific Northwest.
This is the Ron and Don Show on KIRO Radio, 97.3 FM, Seattle's Seahawks station.
All right, love your text messages. The Online Training Academy text line. Anything you want to talk about, 98973. Hit us on that. Rachel Bell, the bottom of the hour. We'll find out what's ringing her bell. Ron, a little bit later, I'll ask him what we're talking about here. The Boys in the Boat, it celebrates. It's 1936. In fact, today's the anniversary. Let me paint a picture for you. It's the U.S. Men's Olympic 8-oar rowing team. It's 9 working-class boys. These are the sons of loggers, shipyard workers, farmers from the American West, right here in the Pacific Northwest, as my son likes to say. And they headed over to Berlin in 1936 to take on Hitler and everybody in the world. And they jumped in their boat, and they got a really slow start.
The Washington crew is probably the slowest starting crew in the world. It gives everybody heart failure.
The crowd is already chanting Deutschland, Deutschland, Deutschland. They don't actually hear the call of the start of their race.
They were thrashing.
I can see that Italy is leading. The United States dragging along, not in the first 3.
Suddenly, Don Hume pops his head up and starts rowing beautifully, and the boat explodes forward.
The United States is beginning to pick up quite rapidly now that good old Washington.
They've had to fight and claw and drag that
The
boat.
United States is in front with 50 meters to go.
It was a total gut check.
40 meters to go. They have half a boat length on Italy. 20 meters to go. 10 meters to go. And the United States wins with Italy second and Germany third. Great Britain fourth and Hungary fifth.
Isn't that incredible? So today's the anniversary, and I felt, did you get chills listening to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
It took me back to 1936. If you're looking for a great book to read, you will love this book, I promise you, The Boys in the Boat. It's by Daniel James Brown. I've read this book twice. That actual boat hangs over at the University of Washington, and right now, Northwest Crew in Lake Stevens, they're building something called the Joe Rantz Boathouse. Who is Joe Rantz? He was one of the boys in the boat. And he was cast aside by his family, abandoned at a very early age. And the book is a lot about those boys, but specifically a lot about him. And you talk about grit. You talk about fortitude. You talk about a comeback. Joe Rantz was certainly that, and so much more. So today on the anniversary of that, Jen Huffman is stopping by the Ron and Don Show right now. She's the granddaughter of the great Joe Rantz, one of the boys in the boat. And she's a pretty badass rower herself. She's won 26 medals in the Northwest Masters Regional Championship, and she's kind enough to stop by the Ron and Don Show. Jen, thank you so much for being here. As you think about Grandpa Rantz today, what are you thinking about specifically? And take us back to 1936. Did he talk a lot about what happened in 1936?
Hey, Ron, or Don, and he didn't really talk about it all that much. Actually, it was kind of surprising when I got a little bit older and I found out more about it as I became an adult that, it wasn't something that he talked about generally. We knew that it happened, but it was something that they kind of left behind as, after college. It was something that, it was in their past and they were all friends, but they kind of moved on from there and didn't really talk about it very much.
Yeah, it's kind of the way that generation was, right? They would go over, and whether it was war or whether it was in a boat, they would come back, and people were so kind and so humble, and in some ways so frugal, and they would just go back to work, keep their heads down, and I mean, let's not forget, these were the sons of loggers and shipyard workers and farmers, and that's kind of how they behaved when they came back to the American West, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And they actually had the opportunity. They were asked to be on a Wheaties box at one point, not too long after the Olympics, and they refused it because that was not the way that they wanted to be remembered. I mean, they were truly an amateur athletic crew, not professionals, and they wanted to stay that way.
When did you start to put two and two together and this become a bigger deal in your own mind?
I would say more than anything else, it was when my grandpa moved in with my mom. So if you've read the book, at the beginning of the book, and Dan's talking about how he goes over to my mom's house and he's interviewing my grandpa. Well, my mom moved my grandpa in with her when he kind of got to the point where he couldn't really live on his own anymore. And as we were cleaning out the attic, we found a whole big chest of all of his memorabilia. So it was scrapbooks and pictures and just different kinds of memorabilia, the jerseys that he'd won. And at that point, I think I was probably about 32 or so. And, we started putting those things into a scrapbook just so that they would be, around for the next generation rather than just sitting in a trunk mildewing, which is basically what was happening to him. So at that point, we got together and I talked to Grandpa about it. And we went to the UW and looked through all their old scrapbooks at the Shell House and picked out some of our favorites. And we made a scrapbook that chronicled his 4 years in college. And so that was kind of like the first step toward having the book written.
Then when you got it
14 years ago,
when you got your hands on the book that Daniel Brown wrote, did it open your mind up to a bigger picture?
Oh my gosh. It was actually very interesting because my mom helped Dan write the book. And so we got to kind of see it as it was being written. And my mom did a lot of work with Dan on just going through and kind of proofreading his chapters and giving him insight onto ways that he thought that Grandpa and Grandma would have reacted in specific situations. So, as the book was being written and we're seeing pieces of it come out, I knew so little about my grandpa's history because he didn't talk about his childhood at all. And I didn't even know that he had worked on the Grand Coulee Dam. It just wasn't something that ever really came up in conversation. So being able to learn about the history of his life, I think I learned almost as much about the history of his life based on that book as anybody else did, because, there wasn't a whole lot that I knew before reading the stuff that Dan was putting together.
Jen Huffman, the granddaughter of Joe Rantz, he was one of the boys in the boat. It's a great book if you want to check it out, from the University of Washington.
Today's the anniversary.
Yeah, today's the anniversary. It's 1936, so it's before World War II. Did your grandpa ever talk about the significance of going over there and kicking Hitler and then you turn around and he may have had friends that went over and fought in World War II and didn't come back?
Yeah. It was interesting because at the point in time where they went over there in 36, Hitler wasn't, he wasn't what we remember him as now. So, it was still he was coming into power. So people didn't really know what was going on. So, for most of them going over there, it was just an opportunity to be there and to come from behind and to, do something that was great. But I don't know that they necessarily really saw it particularly as a political thing at that point. Although as people were doing the salute and saying Heil Hitler in Germany, they would do the salute and say Heil Roosevelt. So in that sense, I suppose it was a little bit political. Certainly now looking back on it, it's amazing what they did.
Yeah, you're the 2014 Canadian Masters national champ in 3 events when it comes to rowing. Did you start rowing because of your grandfather? And do you channel Joe sometimes when you're out there rowing? Do you remember him?
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't actually start rowing until after he passed away, but it definitely was because of him. My son got asked to be a coxswain. And so as I was taking him to practice within a couple of months, I was taking a learn to row class with some of the other parents that were there. And it was just a super natural fit for me. And, I've been a gymnastics coach for 25 years and here comes a sport that's totally different. And it really fit me well. And I found that I had natural talent at it. So as I'm out there rowing, there's a lot of times where I'm thinking about him. And just thinking of how hard they had it back in those days, and how much the equipment's come along and all that too. It's pretty cool. I know that he's looking down on me and he's excited about my successes. Yeah,
Jen's affiliated with the Northwest Crew in Lake Stevens, where they're building the Joe Rantz boathouse right now. Before you go, Ron wants to know, we know where the old Boys in the Boat is. I believe it's at the University of Washington, hanging from the rafters there. What about his medal? Where is his medal?
So the medal is actually at the UW as well. My mom has it or had it, and it's on loan there along with all of his national championship cups. They built a special display case to be able to house a lot of those just different Olympic medals from the different University of Washington crews that were there.
Cool.
Yeah. And so definitely, and it's, so North Cascades crew is the place where we're building the boathouse, and we're really excited to be getting that under construction.
Awesome. People want to be a part of that. How can they do it?
So you can look us up online. We're www.northcascadescrew.com, or we have a Facebook page as well. You can donate, or if anybody who wants to come down and just donate some time, it's all volunteer labor that we're putting into it. So we can always use helpers.
Jen, thanks for being here. Jen Huffman, the anniversary of local legend Joe Rantz and all the boys that were in that boat in 1936, and they kick Hitler in the half. The Ron and Don Show, KIRO Radio. This traffic report this hour brought to you by the Elmer Queen Casino. Then we'll come back with your text messages. The Online Train Academy text line 98973. You are next. Be a radio star. What do you see, Kimmy Klein?
Well, some better news around Pierce County. The earlier crash north 5 at the Stillicum-DuPont Road, it was there for a while. It finally cleared out of the left lane, but both directions of I-5 are jammed, approaching that earlier scene. An earlier crash in Tacoma, south 5 near 38th is gone. We still have a crash in Sequilla, south on 405 at the West Valley Highway in the right lane, and a crash in Bellevue, south on 405 just past 520. It blocks 3 of your left center lanes. KIRO Radio Real-Time Traffic. I'm Kimmy Klein.
Time for texts. It's text time.
Oh, text time on the Online Trade Academy. Text line 98973. What do we have this afternoon, Candy?
Let's start in the 206. Why isn't anyone talking about how terrible the air quality is today?
Air quality
that's a good point.
is terrible. We talked about it. In fact, when we started the show, I was like, Sean, can you see me? State Patrol said we should have our headlights on. Can you see me in the control booth?
I can just barely see you. It's a good thing you have giant muscles.
Yeah, we did that whole thing, right?
Yeah, it was a whole bit.
Yeah,
we did that. We talked about it.
So check it out on the podcast.
Yeah.
That was about 313.
Well, you just relived
and also now.
Yeah.
Sort of
check it out on the
reformed
podcast now.
Yeah, we just relived it. So
There's not a whole lot to talk about other than
actually,
it's
we
smoky.
did do some radio, not to get too defensive, but just to be my damn authentic self right here. When sometimes you can't have anger or you can push back. I'm pushing back a little bit and say we've covered that twice now. What else?
From the 425, Ron.
Yes.
Earlier, we were talking about how SeaTac walked reporters through all of the employee security today. And you were saying there is an illusion out there that we need to know everything. We absolutely do. That is why, as a company, you think you have to be 100% transparent with everyone all the time.
Yeah, that's an illusion. I think when you get computers around a lot and you track everything and we have so much data in our lives, it feels like we should be able to anticipate everything and know everything. And it's just not true. There's eventualities that happen that are outside of your control. And I think learning to deal with a little bit of loss of control in your life is a good thing. So when stuff happens that was unexpected, you're like, okay, I realize intellectually I'm not in control of everything that happens to me.
Yeah, we have heightened security now here at the radio station. The last thing I'm going to do, though, is sit here and explain, number one, why we have heightened security. I know why we have heightened security. I'm not going to explain it to you. Number two, I'm not going to explain to you how it works. So at SeaTac, here's what I don't understand. We understand they have heightened security because it's something that happened very publicly in front of our eyes on Friday night with an airplane. Walking the media around and showing them how everything works is the dumbest thing in the world. I would just say we have heightened security, and that's kind of all we need to know. That didn't make sense to me. What else?
From Michelle, she said, thank you so much for the story about the boys in the boat and Joe Rantz. And then from the 206, please tell your listeners that there is now a young readers version of The Boys in the Boat for kids. It was one of the best reads I've ever had. I refer many people to it.
Yeah, it's interesting about that generation because my grandfather was part of that generation. And he worked for the Arm & Hammer Baking Soda Company. And he was a jockey and rode a horse for Arm & Hammer. And then his connection with the war, everything else, you never heard about it.
Right.
We found out about it when he passed away, and we went through his drawers, and we found all his letters, his love letters to my grandma when he would write her. That's how we found out about him. we knew nothing about him, and yet we thought we knew everything. But that generation was just so darn humble, and I wish they would have shared more of those stories. And sometimes you just got to drag out of them, kicking and clawing.
And people also need to remember, this is the Jesse Owens Olympics. And so when you place this in history, Hitler's on the rise. His entire platform is that they are the motherland, the fatherland. They are the superior race.
They're the Aryan
They
nation.
are genetically superior, athletically superior, intellectually superior. And so when you have not only the boys in the boat, who are just a scrappy bunch of upstarts, win a gold medal.
And it's the Great Depression at this time,
And it's the Great
too.
Depression.
Yeah.
When you have Jesse Owens, a black man, come over. And at the time, remember in America, Jesse Owens couldn't even ride on the bus. Jesse Owens had his own entrance into buildings. Jesse Owens had to drink from the colored water fountain. Jesse Owens goes over and dominates those Olympic Games and receives gold medal after gold medal for the United States. And an embarrassed Hitler was on the stands, who had to stand there and watch that. That is one of the high points, I think, for American athletics, is going to Berlin in 1936 and handing it to Germany.
Keep the text coming
at 98973.